Let me ask you, as readers or viewers of films and series, do you prefer the happy stories or the dark stories? In my own experience, I've always been drawn to this joyful side of life, the sunshine, the dancing, the music, the playing, the laughing, the joking. This is what I like and what I would prefer to create in my art. On the other hand, there's this dark element, and it's almost like the concept of contrast. You can't have contrast in beautiful colors, only bright, without the dark aspect. And I would give two examples. One of a happy story. It's the remake of the movie The Bridge to Terabithia. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend it. It's one of my favorite movies. It's about a boy and a girl, and they enjoy a happy life in their friendship. They meet at school, they're running races, and then they play along their property. They go into the woods, they imagine trolls and giants and magical creatures, and then they also partake in art. They draw, they paint. They have a great childhood together until one day the story takes a turn for the worse and tragedy befalls them. This is a heartbreaking moment in the movie. And if this movie were a series, I wouldn't mind watching episode after episode every single day of how these kids play. That's how happy it looks and how much fun they're having. But now that it's a movie with a sad ending, even though, as I said, it's one of my favorite movies, I don't know how many times I can watch it. It's sort of like I've seen it once or twice and I have it internalized, but I don't know if I would, for example, later, if I have some free time, watch The Bridge to Terabithia again. It would be a little difficult. On the other hand, there are plenty of series that I've seen, and they could go on for maybe 200 episodes, and they're showing just the good life, like in the fairy tales when they say they got married and they lived happily ever after. And there's a joke, why don't they show you this happily ever after? Because, one, people say, well, it doesn't really exist, but two, because it doesn't make for a good story. As I said, these series, they could have 200 episodes of everyone behaving properly, doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and I don't want to watch it. It gets really boring. Until maybe after that 200th episode, there's a twist. Something happens, something goes wrong, and I am riveted to watch the series, wondering, did they get a new writer or a new director? All of a sudden, it's a different series. So I wanted to say, dark writing has this intrigue about it. We want to explore the unknown, almost to go into some dark forest or to go out into space and explore the unknown dark areas. And if you've read a little bit about writing and plot making, you know one of the most important parts to make a story interesting is conflict. So some of that has to be in writing. My own question is where exactly along the spectrum I want my writing to be. So I have some happy writing, let's say love poetry. It's very happy and beautiful. And I also have some dark writing. So this is a consequence of my contact with a bunch of negative people. And you might say, maybe you're complaining too much. But I would never accept that. I think, unluckily, although I have drawn lessons, I've had maybe years and years of contact with many negative people around me. And I wonder if this is the experience of others. Some will say yes, some might not know what I'm talking about. And I was wondering how my art would be perceived, how I would be perceived as a person through my art. Would people think, when they see the happy art, that's naive? Or when they see the dark aspects, would they think, this guy is crazy? So I guess I just wanted to say that even though some of my writing is very happy, that it shouldn't be taken for weakness. Rather, it can be sort of this vulnerability that is beautiful in its own right. On the other hand, even though some of my writing is dark, that's not exactly me entirely either. That I can play with these ideas, I can learn from them, and sort of step back and integrate the two. And if we look from a psychological perspective, when we get an integrated person, that's the definition of maturity, isn't it? And for the dark aspect of it, there's always this danger of going too far. As a writer, when I read other writing and I see characters are being killed off left and right very easily, I think to myself, there's no verisimilitude in there. That's not really how life happens. In life, usually, or sometimes, depending on if you're optimistic or pessimistic, so tragedy does strike at times in real life. So there can be that element to it. As I said, like The Bridge to Terabithia, that's why I'm not criticizing it too much, because it's based on a real story. And that's how it ended in real life, so that's how it's shown in the movie. So that's good writing, I would say, when it has some form of maybe more natural tragedy, then yes, but my criticism would be not to kill off characters too easily, because thankfully that's not what happens in real life too much. How would we be able to blend these two? For the happy side, I would recommend opening our eyes to beauty in the world all around us. I actually started a journal entry, because I take notes all over the place, of things that I find beautiful. So just off the top of my head, this would be like, it's a nice day today, the sun is shining, the weather is warm, there are people going around outside after their business, you are not alone, you have your family, you have your friends, or there's the artistic element with beauty, like music, maybe dancing, maybe architecture is a great source of beauty, especially these old, beautiful, and preserved buildings. And of course, then there's nature, the landscapes and the vegetation, the flowers. All of these are beautiful things. So if we can add more of that in our stories, it's almost like the cinematography of a novel. You can read it and you can experience that beauty, and it grabs hold of you. Someone asked me one time, so you study literature, so maybe you're a writer, what do you get out of all of this? And my answer was spiritual development. I guess for a young artist, their early work will be highly expressive. And then slowly they'll start to be maturing their own style. Like Shakespeare, he had different periods, and I know there was a mature period, and this is sort of the peak, you could say. When he's sort of stabilized, he can access all of these areas at the same time. Sort of, this would be my recommendation. If you feel, especially some sort of angst in your heart, or maybe you're anxious, that's a popular word in our times, then do participate in some kind of art. Again, it can be painting, it can be writing, it could be playing music, it could be dancing. It could be crafts, like sculpting. So many things. I would recommend this to anyone, and not to be too scared if you have different phases of your production. If you have happy artworks, if you have sad ones, if you have angry ones, I think those would cover the main emotions. Or if you have more of a rational bend, maybe you also produce some philosophy, as I do myself. All of this, at some point, when you make enough different branches, they'll sort of start convening. And then you can figure out what kind of a person you really are, not what kind of a person the world tells you you are, but what kind of a person authentically you are. At first, you start making some random pieces, bits and pieces, but do you know what these bits and pieces can do? They can create a mosaic in the end. So you draw them together. It's sort of like a puzzle. You start seeing which piece goes where and how they can connect, and when there's an empty space, you can create new artwork to fill it. And then you step back and it's like each piece is its own piece of art, but together they create something much bigger. So that's what it means to read and to write.